And we're live. Hi, Shikant.
Awesome.
It's nice to
Hi,
have you
Vimo.
here after having an almost we did a we tried to talk to each other using this interface yesterday, and it was pretty much an entire podcast interview in any case. So
Right, micro
that
podcast.
is that is not going to be visible to anyone. But yeah, thank you for joining. How has your day been?
Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's glad. I mean, I'm very happy that we are finally on this live session. And yeah, I've been doing good. Today was a bit hectic, all the work, So, but yeah, finally, after the long day of work, I'm here talking to you. So it's good.
Okay, okay. So we have like one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about obviously is the thing that I put in the headline of this video, which is your Africa trip. But even before I
Right.
start that, I just want you to give a brief intro to uh, who you are and what you do.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So my name is Shikhant Sablania. I make comics, I paint, and I also do a bit of graphic design. Currently, I'm running a studio called Churma, and parallelly, I am also making my online webcomic called African Caravan, which is based on my travel across Africa for 8 months, which I did in 2018 and 19 before the pandemic. So that's primarily what I do. I make comics, I write, I design, and yeah, that's it.
So Churma is something that has been in existence for how many years now?
I started using the name Churma since 2013. And primarily, initially, it was more like a pseudonym, which I used to use when I was making my comics and my
Yeah.
earlier art and everything. And slowly it grew into some form of like a platform where I was also collaborating with other artists, creating comics with other people. And post pandemic, I realized that probably it needs to grow something bigger. So I turned it into like a small design studio of sorts. So what we do at Churma is we create comics, we produce our own content, and also work with other brands and other companies, and make designs for them. Also make animated videos and stuff like that. So that's what I've been doing this year. So yeah,
So you have like I remember the time when Churma was just your username and your handle on the internet,
right.
something to something to identify you with. But Churma has been like you are, I think, would be described as a creative entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, more or less, yes.
Right.
I think so.
So
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm an entrepreneur yet, but yeah, okay.
I mean, you are making money from it, right? So I guess you are
Right,
doing
yeah,
some kind of it is an occupation at least,
right.
right? So how does a webcomic creator end up traveling a foreign country, a foreign continent, in fact? Uh, Again, I'm like, I think in your webcomic also, you have mentioned that we all have these surreptitious biases that creep into our regular behavior. I just called Africa a country again,
Right.
despite having pointed this error out to other people. So Africa is not a country; it's a
Right,
continent like Asia is,
right,
and Shikhant has traveled Africa from uh, bottom upwards, which is like in
right.
itself a little bit of a weird thing because we talk about traveling India from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, right?
Mm,
From north to south.
right,
So
right.
was there any conscious thought that went into your traveling in Africa from niche se upar?
Hmm. So, firstly, I think there are two parts to this question. First, how does a comic maker end up in Africa? And
Yeah.
second is why the trip was designed in such a way. So, I think it started with, in 2016, so it was not me, there were 12 other artists in the journey. And it started with this thought that, let's try to explore how we can think about borders in a different way using art and create possible collaborations all over the world, um, in form of comics or different kind of art forms. and try to explore this whole idea of border in itself. So this was the inception of the idea of traveling in itself as a medium to explore borders, and then also meet new people, understand how they work, how they live. So from that thought, we decided to start with traveling in Africa, because it's a continent which has a lot of stereotypes attached to it, and also a place which has a lot of knowledge, but which is not which we are not familiar with. And that was the reason why we chose Africa as a place to start exploring this thought. um, like I said, there were many other artists, so we were traveling. We decided to start our travel from Cape Town and go till Cairo. Initial plan was to cover 12 countries, but while on the road, we had to skip two. So we ended up traveling 10 countries on the eastern coast of Africa. Um, Cape Town to Cairo happened also because of purely logistic reasons, because the time that we had decided to start the journey was in summers, and the weather was favorable for us, and we wanted to avoid the heavy rains in the Central Africa because we were driving on the road. So we were trying to escape that, and that was how we decided to first start from Cape Town, so that by the time we reach Central Africa, we would have covered that time period in the best weather possible to drive on those roads, because it gets really difficult to drive in the Central African region during the monsoon, like there, monsoon there. So that's the whole idea. And yeah, as you can see, the this is how the comic looks like. So once we did this journey, I came back in 2019 in April, and I started conceptualizing this comic based on my adventures and my experiences in Africa, working with a lot of African artists, as well as our own team of artists who all of us were traveling together. So that was the entire you know plan behind making this comic.
Am I audible? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was trying to just give people a bit of a visual aid with respect to the comic. I've also shared the URL to the comic in the chat. If anyone wants to bookmark it to read later, please do so. It is fascinating. It's
Yes.
got 5, 6 chapters till now.
5 chapters till now.
Five
Yes.
chapters. I finished all 5 chapters last night, and it was very interesting.
Awesome.
If you have read documentary comic books like Kabul Disco or Gaza or what was the other one? The one that was set in Afghanistan.
Kabul Disco is the one set in Afghanistan.
No, Iran में एक set था ना.
Persepolis.
Persepolis, yes.
Persepolis? Yeah.
Persepolis, yes. Persepolis Part 1 and Part 2. If you
Hmm.
have ever read something like that, you will like this. And if you have never read something like that, let this be your first taste into documentary comic books, because this is a fascinating genre that we don't often do justice to. And I can say this with reasonable confidence because I'm a comic book creator working in the Indian comic book industry. We are obsessed with mythology, but this is the kind of
Right.
comic we need to make more. So, yeah. And
I'm
so
glad you liked it.
I loved it. I loved it, and I would, if you ever come out with a print version, I'll be the first person to place an order.
Awesome.
So my first
Interesting.
question to you that has to do with directly with the comic itself. Chicken feet, what do they taste like? You never told. Like I see you chewing into the chicken feet at some point in Africa, and you then
Hmm.
reserved judgment. You didn't tell anyone what it tasted like. But tell us a little bit about that experience, and then what it tastes like.
Okay. Okay. Very interestingly, when I wrote that when I was in Africa, and it was pretty common on the street, when we were in a lot of townships in South Africa, especially.
Hmm.
Um, it's crunchy. There's not a lot of meat in it, so it's pretty bony and mostly bone, skin, and fat. So yeah, that's how it is. I don't know. Taste wise, I think it was a bit bland because they don't put a lot of spices in it like we do.
Like,
So
are you
it's
being
pretty roasted.
are you being diplomatic because you're afraid someone might hear it?
No, I'm just it's bland. I'm being very honest. I think it was pretty
Okay.
tasteless, if I can put it that way. But I could, but I also understand that it's pretty common food for a lot of people. So, and they have developed taste for it. So that's very subjective. Uh, Interestingly, which something which I thought about later while I was in Africa itself is that India में भी तो खाते हैं,
Yeah.
and somehow we live in that I don't know privileged bracket that we don't eat it, but there are a lot of people in our country as well who eat it. So it's not something drastically different. It's just that we don't experience it uh, often. So we feel that's something
Could be.
strange or weird. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the comic, you go into great detail about the struggles that you all face, both in terms of team
Mm,
building, team maintenance, rather, and the fight for resources, money, food, etc. So,
right.
was there any point in the journey when you felt like you wanted to leave? Because we do know of some of your team members who did leave, and
Yeah.
like I was तो मैं totally सोच रहा चाचा चौधरी और गिलबर्ट की वापसी. But was there was there ever a time that you felt like leaving?
um, there were a lot. Honestly speaking, not really. And I'm not, trying to be very cool and all. Like me, I was some supernatural being or anything. Of course, I had my own frustration and irritations. But I think one interesting thing which I realized while we were about to finish the journey was that it depended a lot on the team, and uh, although we all were from different continents, different cultures, it was very interesting how we all had this natural tendency to, you know, uh, try our best to make sure that we finish this journey, to make sure that we are, uh, um, in a state which is comfortable for everyone, even though we had limited resources, even though we were struggling for a lot of things like funding and kal ka khana kahan se aayega and all of that. But I think that is the thing which I think drove everyone to try a bit more, push ourselves a little better, and try to see how we can make the best out of this journey. So that was the case. For me personally, yes, I was frustrated often, especially not with resources, especially like not having proper beds to sleep, like camping all the time. Those kind of things, of course, take a toll on your body. My frustration more was, I think, probably things not happening as I want them to happen, because as an artist or as a creative person or as a human being generally, you're used to doing things in a certain way. But when you're on the road, it's totally unpredictable. It's totally out of your control. So that unpredictability is exciting and interesting for a few weeks, for a few months. But when it's such a long journey, like 8 months, you're almost, every day you don't know what's going to happen. So that started taking a toll on my mental, I think, like it started building that stress, mental stress in the mind. And one thing which was very challenging for us was that we were also creating art while we are traveling. So there are there will be some days when I'll be like I'll wake up with this thought that okay, I have to paint this mural, but then oh, गाड़ी का टायर तो फ्लैट हो गया, अभी पहले टायर फिक्स करना है, फिर मुझे वहां जाके पेंटिंग करनी है, एंड देन ओ
Yeah.
अच्छा रास्ते में तो पेट्रोल भी खत्म हो गया है, तो ओ शिट अच्छा पेट्रोल भी मेरे को फिगर आउट करना है, एंड देन so there are like thousand things going on in your head while you also want to make a good art, while you're because you're like, oh wow, I have such a great opportunity to work with these other artists in Africa, so I should make the best out of this. And what you're struggling with, कि अरे यार आज अभी खाना कौन बनाएगा, अभी पास्ता बनाना है या चावल बनाना है या दाल कौन पका रहा है, so those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So speaking of which, I actually wanted to get, because it was a fascinating thing for me to read it as an outsider sitting in an AC room. Well, the AC is off because it's winter, but you get my point. In a comfortable position,
Right,
and
right.
looking at an artist putting themselves through that kind of a grueling system, where, like you have mentioned in the comic, that some of your colleagues fell ill. and there were
Hmm.
disagreements and a whole lot of stuff that artists kind of, I don't know about all artists, maybe you're not like this, but are you the kind of artist who enjoys putting himself through all this? Because I'm not. So it was a
Hmm.
fascinating experience for me looking at it from the outside. So I wanted to ask you, the prospect of putting yourself through that much discomfort, let's just say, was this
Hmm.
appealing
Hmm.
to you?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like you thought this will make my art better?
Uh, I don't think so. Honestly speaking, I would have been very happy if we had good funding and I would have been just able to focus on my art and not कि अगले दिन का पेट्रोल कहाँ से डालना है गाड़ी में. Honestly speaking, that would have been the best thing. But it somehow happened that we ended up in a position where we had not anticipated that the funds will get over by the fourth country, and then of course it's not that we had not planned for things. It's not that we did not have any strategy or structure in mind. All of those things we had been planning for 2 years in advance before even beginning the journey. uh, but of course we did take that risk of let's figure it out, let's try to solve it as we keep moving. um, so a lot of things were not expected, but I think one thing which we all realized that now we have like we were almost like halfway through the journey. We were like, there's no going back now, and I especially had this which I maybe later realized that I really had this thing that I want to finish this, no matter what, at least I should try to make the best out of the situation that I am in, and that sort of drove me to keep, trying out to make things work and, see how we can do it better. But this whole idea that नहीं मेरे को तो torture करने अपने आप को जबरदस्ती ऐसा तो नहीं कोशिश करते थे हम लोग, तो वो नहीं था थॉट.
Okay, okay. At some point in the comic, you also mentioned that there is a purpose to artist collaborations, and it is to bring out the voice of the people of the place where you are doing the collaboration. So, to what
Right.
extent in the entire journey, because you're kind of halfway through the comic itself, but in the entire journey, do you think you got close to doing it 100%, 50%? What?
Hmm. Um, yeah. So one interesting thing, um which I always think about is that whenever we go and collaborate with other people, I intentionally wanted to make it uh, like a collaborative process where everybody gets to talk, everybody gets to put their opinions and thoughts together, and we create something which we all are proud of, even if it's not our best work, but it should have that space where we all are feeling that yes, I did something which is interesting, which is amazing, where we all get to learn something. So that was the reason why we always kept that in mind, that we should be uh, learning from Africa, learning from African artists and understanding how they approach their art, how they approach their life, rather than coming there as an outsider and trying to dictate things. Because speaking to a lot of African artists, even while I was in India, and through the journey also, we heard this often that Africa has
Your
become
audio
this
video is
place
slowing down a little.
or try to dictate things, and we wanted to stay away from that whole, I don't know, unprofessional also, and also slightly problematic, which I feel is when you try to tell the other artist
Yeah,
what to do because you have
you
come
know
from
better.
another place and you feel that, yeah. So that is the whole thing. That's why we were really trying to focus. So let's say, for example, I'll give you an example maybe that will make it more interesting. And so let's say when we'll go to a particular city, we would first have 3 to 4 days of workshopping with local artists. So we'll invite. So we had a local art community or an art, agency who which was helping us out in that particular country, our local coordinators or partners,
Huh.
and they would facilitate these workshops, along with us, and we would invite artists from that city to come together with us, and just for the first 3 to 4 days, we will just workshop, we'll just explore ideas and themes that they want to talk about and understand how we can merge our ideas together and create something meaningful out of it. So I'm sure you must have seen that in the comic also. In our team, there were artists from different mediums. So there were
Yeah.
musicians, there were theater artists. I was painting. There were people who were filming this whole. They were making the
Performers,
documentary, and
photographers. Yeah.
exactly. So we were trying to see how we can explore all of these mediums while bringing out these ideas together. So that has been a core thought. So we would have, like, on an average, we would spend at least 10 to 15 days in a city. And after workshopping, we will start making those collaborations. And that whole week's or 10 days work will end into a final showcase where we would call people from the community, everybody. It will be an open event where we would call everybody and showcase what we made, and then have a discussion or talks around that, and share experiences. So that was the structure of what we were trying to do. Um, of course, there were like changes based on where we were, the kind of partner organizations we had. Sometimes we, like, in Zambia, we did it in a circus. In Sudan, we did it in a in Impact Hub, which is more like a corporate, like we were kind of an environment where we have like business people and artists from the city coming together. So each country
Yeah.
had its own interesting things that we learned from, and we sort of explored how we can collaborate.
Okay. So
मैं
you
बहुत
have
मैं बहुत लंबे
mentioned
लंबे आंसर
that
दे रहा हूँ ना.
no, that's the whole point of a podcast, man. You're supposed to ramble. If you're giving short answers, I'll be panicking. I'll be like, oh God, 10 हो गया है और वो अभी तक कुछ भी नहीं बोला almost. Like he's giving me one word answers. This is hectic. I'll believe it. मुझे watch
Awesome,
time
man.
चाहिए. मैं YouTube पे हूँ, मेरे को watch time चाहिए. That's why.
Awesome,
So
awesome, awesome.
give long
Cool,
answers
cool.
is no problem at all. And so
सही है.
so you mentioned that your goal when you were like you had gone to Africa with the intention of making a webcomic out of it, or was there something else on the plate also?
Um, yes, I had thought that I would document this journey in form of a comic. How it would be, what kind of comic would it be? I had no clue. Would it
Okay.
be like a fictional story, or would it be documentary style like it is now? Will it be a travelogue? I had no clue. But this was clear that I will document it in some form of visual comic or something like that. Um, I was also making graffiti, street art, and murals, and a lot of all these visual things while on the road.
Yeah.
So these are the two things which I had planned
At
in advance. That okay,
at,
each country I'll go to, I'll make a painting
at
and
one point,
I'll make
you
comics.
painted your head green also.
Yes, yes, that was part of the performance art that we were doing.
Yeah. So you put your toes in multiple. What's the metaphor? Put your toes where? Oh, you put your fingers in multiple
Yeah,
bowls of water, I guess.
something like that. Yeah,
So all
yeah.
I remember was
Uh,
Tenali Raman and the bowls of kheer that were in front of that temple. But forget about it. I messed it up.
it's okay. So even I couldn't remember that. Put it your toes in different shoe. नहीं shoes नहीं पता नहीं क्या जो
Different
भी है.
waters. No, dip your toes in different
waters.
waters. I
Dip
think the
your
metaphor
toes.
is.
हाँ ऐसा
Yeah.
कुछ होता है. हाँ हाँ हाँ. Cool. तो
So
नहीं ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं मतलब I was just going with the flow honestly. We're like okay, the group decided that we'll do a performance art. I was like okay, जो मर्जी करवा लो मेरे से जो बोलो क्या करना है कर दूंगा मैं. So it
no,
was
that's
mostly
what's
that.
fascinating to me because you are a designer and you went into something this adventurous with a little bit of trepidation, I would assume, because that's what came across in the comic also. But you handled it like a champ. But then there is also a huge part of it also is also that you are telling your own story. So if even if you did not handle it
Hmm.
like a champ, you would not
सही
you
में.
would not say it like in your
Of
comic you're
course.
going to come across like a hero, as I am sure it's true of everyone else. But are you aware of any other projects that came out of this made by your colleagues?
Uh, there is a documentary in making. So,
Okay.
so we had shot a lot of footage while we were on the road. So currently we are trying to produce that documentary and see if we can release it somehow. So that is one thing which is in making. We did a lot of collaborations which were very local and very
Okay.
specific on the journey project kind of. So like the wall murals or or the performances that we made, and we also the made a lot of music on the journey, so it's available to listen to on SoundCloud. I'll I don't know if I can share the link right now, but I will share it with you.
Great.
Maybe you can add it in the description of the video
I
later
will.
or
I will. I
something
will.
like
So the reason I
that.
asked
So
about
yeah.
that is because you mentioned yesterday when we were just talking casually that there is some amount of difficulty when it comes to convincing someone that this is a thing of value. And part of it
Hmm.
might be because it's not a glamorous area. It's
Hmm.
not
Hmm. Hmm.
it's not
Hmm.
Las Vegas, it's Africa. And people and publishers
Right.
might hesitate, right? So you said that you had
Hmm. Hmm.
some
Hmm.
problems getting it published as a print book. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because one of the things I want
Uh,
to do is like like because this is a project that is unorthodox to say the least. So I want to also throw some light on, like, I want to encourage other artists to do what you did, but also want them
hmm.
to be aware of the problems of doing something like this.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I think book publishing is generally difficult, irrespective of what kind of book you're writing, I guess, because publishing is hard, and also there are a lot of other avenues where people are writing now. You know, you can blog, you can do thousand other things, and getting a hang of a good publishing house and all that things that you need to cross to reach there is not easy, generally speaking. But in terms of comic, it gets slightly more difficult because the readership is not huge. So, one thing which we always face as comic creators is that we have very limited audience. And that limited audience also, like you mentioned sometime earlier, wants to, or maybe is only shown mythology or
Yeah.
superhero kind of comics. So even we don't have that good flow of like a communication between the creators and people, how they want to really you know what they really want to read. So that is always that's always an issue with comics. So yes, publishing, getting it published is always difficult. There are a lot of logistic and financial concerns that publishers usually have while publishing comics, because my comics being in color was a
Hmm.
major drawback, which people, a lot of um, uh, पब्लिकेशन एजेंट्स टोल्ड मी कि अरे कलर में तो बहुत कॉस्टली छपेगी, ये तो कोई नहीं लेगा, ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में बनाओ। तुम्हारी
Yeah,
पहली कॉमिक है, तुम्हें ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में बनानी चाहिए। आई वाज
which is
लाइक
weird
ओके
because
सॉरी
one
बट
of the things that, like, working in the Indian comic book industry, I cannot think of any black and white comic at all except when it's a vanity project. So what happens is that most comics are in color, and people assume that comics are going to be in color. So these must have been mainstream publishers, right?
yeah, mainstream publishers who
Okay.
yeah, who mentioned that this is going to be a problem. uh, so I, और अच्छा, ऑनेस्टली स्पीकिंग ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने बहुत सारे publishers को pitch किया. I just pitched it to the ones I knew, the ones I'm familiar with. Uh, I'm sure I mean, I hope there might be more people who will read the web comic eventually, and if somebody is interested in publishing it, I would be happy to do it. ऐसा नहीं है. But having said that, हाँ, difficulty तो आती है comic publish करने में, and that is
Okay.
exactly the reason why I decided to put it on web. Uh, I had thought about it that I want to put it on web. ऐसा नहीं है कि web came out as अरे यार अभी publish नहीं हो रही, चलो web पे डाल देते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है. It was like 50-50 वाला decision कि
Yeah.
अच्छा,
Yeah.
मैं इतने time तक try करूंगा. मैं so okay, I started like making this comic in August of 2019, and by August of 2020 I was like अभी तो कोई अभी मैंने एक साल कर लिया कोशिश पूरा, अब नहीं होगा तो फिर नहीं होगा, भाड़ में जाए, मैं तो ऑनलाइन डाल रहा हूँ. So that was my impatience basically कि आई डिड
Okay.
नॉट हैव द पेशेंस टू वेट फॉर कि अच्छा अभी मेरे को तुम 2 साल बाद जवाब दोगे कि हाँ तुम्हारी बुक हमें छापनी, तो आई एम सॉरी अब तो नाउ निकल चुकी है, मैंने डाल दिया ऑनलाइन. सो
Okay.
वो थोड़ी इम्पेशंस भी है ना मेरे अंदर, क्या करें.
So there is this question from Samarth in the chat, which you can see on your screen. He's asking about if you have received any culture shocks
Hmm.
that you can share.
Hmm. Yeah, there were many cultural shocks since we, like, in a different continent. Every country has a very different culture. Okay, one thing which like we started this conversation with, that Africa is not a country; it's a continent. तो वहाँ पे 52 कंट्रीज हैं. तो
So you got 52 cultural shocks.
हाँ, हम we went to 10 countries, so we got 10
Okay.
cultural shocks.
10 culture shocks,
Uh,
at least.
uh, at least, and many more, because each country has different tribes, like
Yeah.
how we have different areas are different, right? So you have different things also happening in each country. So cultural shocks, yes, of course there were many. Like food was very interesting. So I we had, like, food was one thing which was like, oh, okay, this is interesting, this is like unique, very unique. You were talking about chicken feet. We also had grasshoppers in Uganda, uh, which is pretty
Fried?
common in the street. Fried,
Like what
yes.
kind of grass? Fried? Okay, okay. Yeah, I've heard of those.
That, and pigeon in Egypt. It's very common. And yeah, so these kind of food cultural shock, like food shocks, were very interesting. Like, अच्छा ये भी होता है, oh cool. And and I wanted to try it also. I was like, चलो मैं खाऊंगा, कोई नहीं खाएगा तो. So that was interesting. एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज, ऐसे बहुत सारी हैं, पर we were at somebody's house, and they were cooking meal for us in Ethiopia. We were crossing Ethiopia, and in the morning, I usually wake up early, so I was early. I was just chatting with them and all. So they were like, "Yo, so yeah, you are not from these, like, so we are all from different countries, right?" So these guys, like, so the lady who was cooking, she was like, "So where are you from?" So it's like, I'm from India. He's like, no, you're joking. You're not from India. I was like, no, I'm from India. Like, okay, yeah. So you must be Muslim, right? I was like, no, I'm Hindu. It's like, what is Hindu? So I was like, yeah, it's a religion, like Christianity and Islam. It's like, acha. And it was very interesting that uh, I was, we somehow would assume, being in India, that everybody would know what Hinduism is, right? Like, people would know
Yeah,
Hinduism,
yeah,
a
yeah.
common religion.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
Totally.
not common, like for a lot of people in the world, they feel that Egypt, Christianity and Islam are the only two religions for
Only
them,
two religions. Yeah.
so it's very interesting like that, so when you go to these pockets, you see, like, you are just, you question everything, and you're like, oh, अच्छा, ये मैंने सोचा नहीं था कि ऐसा भी हो सकता है क्या. Oh, right, that way. And uh, lot of things like that. I don't know, it's very difficult to point out specifically. uh, Lot of interesting things when you are on the road. Uh, you're always in this space where you're like, oh, is it safe to go there? Is it, should we park our cars here? Should we camp in this area? Those kind of things are always constantly lingering on your mind. And then Africa was very inviting, and we were very surprised to see the hospitality of people, specifically in the, and I think that's true in India as well. If you go to rural areas, if you are, in that,
Yeah.
on the road, and people are very inviting, and they would always,
Yeah.
share their meal with us. Sometimes you also camped in people's backyards. You know,
Yeah, I
uh,
saw that. I saw that. That was
so
fascinating.
so yeah, stuff like that. So that's very interesting, and I was like, wow, this is so amazing, and people are so generous there. हाँ, तो मतलब यही सब काफी काफी पॉजिटिव, काफी
Shimi has pointed out
इंटरेस्टिंग
that a
चीज थी.
lot of people watch Indian daily soaps in Africa, and you
यस,
did mention this in the
यस,
comic also. Apparently, there were
यस,
entire Indian movies, Hindi films being played on African television, dubbed in English in Indian voices.
yes. So it was very interesting that we were amazed by the amount of reach Bollywood has, because in, like, the remotest of the towns in Africa, there were kids who would know entire songs by heart. I remember we were in some small town in Tanzania, and this girl was singing Ashiki 2 songs. Even I had no idea what song it is. I was like, ये तो हिंदी गाना है, कोई कौन सा गाना है? Then
Ashiki 2
we
is the
had to
new one,
search.
right? Ashiki
Yeah,
2
the
is the
new
new
one.
one. Acha, because I remember Ashiki as the 90s one. I'm old.
Right. So the new one. So I had no clue about the songs. Like इसको कुछ तो ऐसा search करके Google search करके lyrics. I was like, oh अच्छा, oh okay, cool, interesting. So so those kind of things used to happen, and it was very yeah, surprising for us also.
Right. So you had at some point in the comic made a comparison between, like, I'm reminded of this. The chain of thought is this: somebody thought that you were
Mm-hmm.
Muslim, but there was also someone else
Mm.
who thought you were white,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that happens with me, and also because it's similarly how we have that stereotype. So there's a similar stereotype that the world also has of India. That India में तो एक ही skin color के लोग होते हैं. Like, there's like
हाँ,
a standard Indian face that is there, and हम सब लोग हाथी पे चढ़ के नाचते रहते हैं, और सब लोग ऐसा चमकीले कपड़े पहन के सड़कों पे नाचते हैं और बॉलीवुड गानों पे पूरे
हाँ,
दिन. तो वो तो है ही, मतलब थोड़ा सा वहां पे बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग होता था ऐसा. I remember in Egypt, somehow people are fascinated with Amitabh Bachchan. So when we were in Egypt, and we would be chatting to people, anybody, like going on the street, taking a bus, or anybody, it's like, where are you from? You don't look like you're from here. We are from India. Oh, Amitabh Bachchan. I was like, yes, Amitabh Bachchan. So so everybody, I mean, India, Amitabh Bachchan. That's the amount of
Amitabh Bachchan
conversation
or
I
Shah
had.
Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan also happens a lot
Shah Rukh
in
Khan also.
Germany and stuff, I think.
Mm.
And you
So
you
that was
have this is
interesting.
not the first time. This is not the first time this white person problem has appeared in your life, has it?
No, I also have made a comic about it earlier,
That's the
like
one I
few years
wanted to
ago.
talk about.
Right, Gora Dalit.
Gora Dalit.
Yeah, yeah. वो तो एक अलग ही पॉलिटिक्स है. वो तो एक अलग ही खतरनाक पिटारा है जो हम खोलेंगे अगर, तो फिर खतरनाक सा है. ओके.
अच्छा.
बट हाँ, दैट्स अ प्रेटी कॉमन स्टीरियोटाइप ना, कि दलित आदमी है तो काला सा गंदा सा ही होना चाहिए, और बिल्कुल वैसा. तो वो थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम है.
Okay. And you went to the apartheid museum where you were wondering if, like, like discrimination happens in every place on earth. In India, it takes the form of caste discrimination. There, it took the form
Right,
of racism. Uh,
right.
how close do you think the two situations are? Do you think they're somewhat similar, very similar, not similar at all? Or
I
did you
think
not reach any
discrimination.
conclusion about it?
Hmm. Uh, Honestly, I am. Um, it's very difficult to compare both of them. I would say that. Uh, However, see, any kind of discrimination has, like the core feeling of discrimination is same, irrespective of where it is coming from, right? The kind of feeling probably a person gets when you're discriminated against is pretty human and pretty universal, is probably what I would
Hmm.
say. However, the structure of how it is being decided, or how it is being what is the motivation behind it, of course differs in societies. When I was in apartheid museum, I had lot of these. Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's amazing. So if you visit, any people who are listening, if you ever visit, please go there. um, so that museum had a lot of these very interesting facts and interesting anecdotes, how we understand apartheid or racism in Africa, because it's there in one place in the comic also, that in some in some years suddenly Indians were white people.
Becoming white. Yeah, yeah, I
Suddenly,
know. Yeah.
yeah,
The
suddenly
chameleons. Yeah.
exactly. So chameleons, so they used to call them, right? So it is very like it's very interesting how this politics keeps on changing. Based on which leader is appointed, what is the politics of that particular party. So it's not as simplified as we are shown or as we read about. Ki,
Yeah.
acha, black people, then colored people, and white people. It's not as simple as we are told. So it has its own complexities. It has its own
Yeah.
nuances that we
In
often
fact,
Yeah.
There's this YouTuber called FD Signifier, whose channel I've been
Hmm.
watching a lot. He's a black man who talks about black media properties, basically media created by black people, and he
Right.
talks about he has made some videos where he talks about the problem of colorism within the black community.
Hmm.
And there is another book called How the Irish Became White, because the first interactions
Hmm.
between America and Ireland was that
Hmm.
Irish people were also being brought into America as slaves, and it took them quite some time
Hmm.
to be recognized as white people because they grew, their
Hmm.
influence and all that happened. So yeah, it's a fascinating, like, spectrum of, like, it's very dynamic, it changes. And what what is water flowing this way in one century becomes water going
Hmm.
flat in another century, and then it changes also, so it's quite fascinating.
Right. Right.
So
Contrary, I think, I mean, the same kind of nuances also exist in caste in our country, you know. अभी जैसा पूरा वो pro reservation anti reservation debate चलता रहता है constantly, right? And
mm,
there's always also this कि अरे तुम्हारे पास तो पैसा है, तुम कैसे दलित हो सकते हो, you know. So like all those kind of logic, you know, it's very it's and similarly we can learn a lot about our own fallacies and our own shortcomings or our own complexities. Sometimes we start observing them when we see it in another culture, because
yeah,
हम अपने देश में तो एक particular strata में जीते हैं ना. We are not never, we are very we all live in our bubbles, right? So that bubble breaking needs to happen to understand, oh right, that amount of you know
yeah.
uh, diversity exists in even
Yeah,
in my own,
we
like, you know, city or
recently
place.
we had this problem with some stand-up comedians getting dragged into problems because they had made jokes about reservations some time ago, which is another bag of cats that I'm not going to open now, but I have written about it
Mm-hmm.
plenty. There are a few questions in the chat, but before that I want to
Yeah.
ask you something. Like, moving out of Africa, I wanted to talk about Churma a little bit. You are a creative entrepreneur,
Right.
or or an independent creator of sorts. Did you ever have a plan B, like, if this doesn't work I will do that?
Mm-hmm. No, I did not have a plan B ever. I still don't. Um, I never thought that way. Okay, so I studied electrical engineering. I tried to, then I
Hmm.
dropped out of that college. And that's when I started making art and comics and everything.
Why did you
So,
drop out?
kabhi wo, uh, I don't know, it was not my cup of tea, and it was
Acha.
pretty boring. And I wanted to explore things and do. हाँ मतलब वो थोड़ा बोरिंग थोड़ा हुआ था बेकार. I was doing
Hmm.
electrical engineering. क्या एक्साइटिंग है उसमें? मतलब है,
Ah,
I'm
yeah.
sure, okay, no offense to electrical engineers, electrical engineering is great, it's amazing, I'm sure it's the best thing to do in this world, but for me it was pretty boring. And actually engineering was not boring. I like science, I like reading, I like studying. The problem was the system, because everybody around me was racing to get a placement in a particular company. That was the main goal of everyone's
Yeah, yeah.
life, right? And I had problem with it. I didn't want to surround myself with that kind of people, I think. So so I think that was one reason. But yeah, so उसके बाद से I've been doing, you know, all this. So ऐसा कोई plan भी नहीं है, मतलब यही है कि अपना काम करते रहेंगे जब तक होगा.
Okay. So how is it going though? Churma and your plans, the plan A that you have stuck to, how is it
Mm-hmm.
going? Like, do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? Like, this is not that
Yeah.
like that
Huh.
interview question. Where
Mm-hmm.
do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Mm. हाँ नहीं मतलब but like your question is very valid. Firstly, I think as a creator, there's always this constant, you know, thought कि अरे ये नहीं चला तो क्या होगा, you know, how will I survive, how will I do this, you know, how. And moving forward, as I'm getting older, I'm beginning to realize कि okay, I really need to, you know, then focus on certain things more than I used to, you know. Probably like a trip like, you know, African caravan, how I did, you know, 3 years ago, probably now I would slightly think twice about doing it, probably, you know. So those kind of things start coming into your head. now that I'm running a studio and I have people working with me, so I feel a bit more responsible towards them.
Hmm.
However, it's going steady. I think this year has been uh, it has been a huge learning, honestly, and I think making this comic itself has been a learning in itself, because probably when I was living that journey, when I was living those things, I was not thinking about them as deeply as I do now when I have to tell it to somebody else. When I'm writing
Hmm.
it for an audience, so I rethink about those conversation I had with my people. I rethink about how am I going to explain this particular thing to myself first and then to the reader. So those kind of learnings keep on happening, and I think in Churma we also try to, like, we all of us who are working together, creating comics or uh, animating, doing all these kind of things, is that how we can try and learn as much as possible and how to evolve as a creative person, and exploring different mediums, trying to understand how we can break the stereotypes that we have in our heads while making these arts. So this sort of back and forth keeps on happening inside the team as well. And with Churma, the plan is just to keep making more comic in this space, which is travel, which is related to culture, which talks about breaking stereotypes, breaking borders, and also in a funny, in a satirical way. At the same time, also try to grow it as a studio where we produce work for other people who are like-minded, and try to create interesting content around it. Try to solve, design problems using these kind of mediums like comics or storytelling. So this is the whole idea behind Churma.
Okay. Okay. So I have some questions in the chat. We are at the 46-minute mark, but before I get to those, I want to run a little bit of a commercial break, which is an
Okay,
ad for
cool.
something I myself am doing. So I run it once every live stream.
Awesome.
It's about a podcast that I'm starting. Just hold on. Let it play out. कल्प फिक्शन में स्वागत है आपका। ये एक अजीब दुनिया है, या शायद ये कहना बेहतर होगा कि ये कई अजीब दुनियाओं का रीमिक्स है। यहाँ राक्षस हैं, पर यहाँ रोबोट भी हैं। यहाँ स्पेस है, पर यहाँ जादू भी है। यहाँ आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है, पर यहाँ देवता भी हैं। यहाँ वो सब कुछ है जिसकी कल्पना मानवों ने की है, और कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें भी जिनकी कल्पना ना की गई है और ना की जा सकती है। कल्प फिक्शन पर आपको सुनने को मिलेगी ओरिजिनल हिंदी कहानियाँ जो आई हैं दूर भविष्य से और प्राचीन अतीत से, और इन सब कहानियों का वास्ता होगा आपसे, यानी कि आज के इंसान से। एपिसोड्स को सुनने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें स्पॉटिफाई पर, एप्पल पॉडकास्ट पर या अपने फेवरेट ऑडियो प्लेटफॉर्म पर। Yeah, that was it.
Awesome. So it's a sci-fi podcast you're starting.
It's a science fiction podcast in Hindi,
Awesome.
because I
Awesome.
figured that the only when someone thinks about uh, when someone thinks about fantasy in India, it's either mythology or it's horror. And
Hmm.
so proper fantasy, epic fantasy does not necessarily need to invoke only two emotions. One is devotion, the other is fear. And we are like,
Hmm.
if you look at contemporary culture also, you're seeing the results of that devotion and fear, right? So
Right.
fantasy should
Right.
be able to
Right.
evoke more than that. That is the goal of it.
Hmm. 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 Say. No, that's very interesting. When is it
Right.
starting? When is it? When do you
It
have the first
started. There
episode?
are one video,
Acha.
one not video, one audio episode is already up. It's called Antim Sakshi. If you search for
Oh,
Cult
cool.
Fiction on Spotify, you'll find it.
And is it available on all podcasting platforms, or
Yes,
is it
yes.
Spotify specific?
नो स्पॉटिफाई पे इतना मतलब मैं अभी इतना ये नहीं हो कि स्पॉटिफाई मुझे पैसे देगा एक्सक्लूसिव करने के लिए। इट्स अवेलेबल
I don't
एवरीवेयर।
know. Right? Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Because I
राइट।
use this podcast addicts wala platform, so
पॉडकास्ट एडिक्ट्स,
I will.
हाँ, इट शुड बी देयर
Hmm.
आल्सो। पॉडकास्ट एडिक्ट्स का ये
Okay.
है कि इफ योर पॉडकास्ट इज अवेलेबल ऑन एप्पल पॉडकास्ट देन इट पिक्स इट अप।
Mm-hmm.
यू डोंट हैव टू सेपरेटली सबमिट इट, आई थिंक।
Right.
बट या, so we have a question from Samarth. He says, tell us something about international borders in Africa. I have heard that there are many tribes in Africa which are kind of semi nomadic and would change their countries based on seasons. So, did you come across this?
There are a lot of tribes in Africa which do change countries, and a lot of borders in Africa are very porous. So, like when we were in, like let's say when we were in Uganda, so there were a lot of people who would just cross the border, go to Congo, work, and then come back. So that is very common. And yes, there are a lot of tribes. We did not come across a lot of tribes in Africa because we were not crossing through those tribal areas specifically, which probably you would if you go on a safari, typical those safaris where you go into the interiors, you interact with the tribes and all. We were focusing mostly on the cities because we were working with artists and all. But yes, that's true. Um, Another thing about borders in Africa is which should be talked about is how borders in Africa are straight lines, and that is a problem because they were clearly drawn by
Yeah.
colonialists, and they are not designed for the local culture. It is not designed keeping in mind our their local tribes and what their national borders were before
Hmm.
the colonizers came in. It's like imagine India, Pakistan, every in the whole Asia. How it would be? It's the same in Africa. So that's why there are so you hear about a lot of these wars in Africa. You hear about all these civil war happening in this country, in that country, specifically for the reason that the borders are divided as such that uh, one tribe will be in majority in a particular country and then completely in minority in another country, and they would want,
Yeah.
of course, they would have their leaders living in that country trying to fix a war, trying to occupy those kind of politics. So border is a very a topic that is commonly discussed in Africa. Generally, whoever you meet across countries, especially in southern Africa and Central Africa. Not so much
Hmm.
in Northern Africa, but
Okay.
yeah, quite often in.
I'm
So there are
looking.
two Africas, which is interesting. क्योंकि वो
Huh.
there's Islamic Africa, then there's Christian Africa. तो वो एक अलग war चल रही है. तो वो बड़ा
North South?
interesting.
So,
North
which
South
one is
वाला,
North and
हाँ.
which one is South?
So North is all Islamic, right?
Okay.
And Southern Africa is primarily Christian. So that's why
Okay.
you have like this. So countries which fall in the at the border of these two religious sort of uh, powers. So you have
Huh.
war. So South Sudan is Christian, North Sudan is Islam. So that war is
Oh, wow.
Nigeria also.
Okay.
South Nigeria uh, is constantly, people are trying to, there's always this thing going on between northern and southern Nigeria. So that's why this belt is
Did
a
you,
bit volatile.
personally, in the course of your journey, run into any manifestations of these conflicts?
Yes, once when we were in Ethiopia,
Okay.
we did cross through that. It's going to be there in the comics, so it's going to be interesting for the readers to read.
Yeah, don't spoil it.
Um, so I'll not spoil it, but yes, it was pretty, I would say, lethal. We were literally in middle of the conflict.
Okay. So my last
Yeah.
question to you is going to be, I have decided what my last question to you is going to be about. But before that happens, I just wanted to ask, before I ask that question, everyone in chat, like 5 people right now, if you have any questions, if you have any final questions for Shikhan, please leave them in the chat right now. And my last question to you is that having gone through everything you went through, if you got a call right now to do something like this again, maybe not in Africa, maybe in Africa, would you go for it?
Yes, I think I would.
Okay.
Uh, बस मैं थोड़ा बोलूंगा कॉमिक्स खत्म कर लूं, थोड़ी अफ्रीकन कैरावैन के बारे में पूरा कर लो, फिर उसके बाद करें तो ज्यादा अच्छा है. बट हाँ, आई वुड लव टू. एंड इन फैक्ट आई हैव बीन थिंकिंग अबाउट इट this year that probably we should start thinking about doing these kind of journeys often, specifically in, as they say, south, you know, probably in South America, in Southeast Asia, because we know, and one thing which I really feel is that we know so less about our neighbors. We know so less about Venezuela or Peru for that matter, and we know all the states in United States of America. We know everything about कि अच्छा कनाडा में कौन से स्टेट का कैपिटल कौन सा है, बट हमें ये नहीं पता कि हमारे नेबर्स का कल्चर क्या है, वहाँ की कंट्रीज में क्या
Yeah.
खाते हैं लोग. तो that I feel is slightly problematic, and I think we as artists should try to learn more about um, the cultures that exist around us and how we can learn from them and exchange knowledge. So that I think is very important.
Right. So yeah, Divyansh Gautam says मजा
So
आ
yeah,
गया, बढ़िया था. Thank you, Divyansh.
awesome.
But
Thanks, Divyansh. Yeah.
so I guess I have a lot of questions, but I can't ask them because I don't want to spoil the webcomic for myself. When is the next chapter coming?
Next chapter will be out in January,
Okay.
first week of January. Chapter number 6 will be out, where we'll be closing Zambia and moving towards Tanzania. So that'll be, I think, interesting for the readers. And हाँ मतलब सही है. Please, मतलब if you have more questions, I'm more than happy to
Samarth has
answer. Yeah,
asked,
okay.
what are the few things that India and people here should learn from the African experience? Like, do you mean from Africa or from the webcomic about Africa? I don't know, but yeah, feel free
ये
to
भी है.
interpret it.
People in India should learn about Africa. बहुत सारी चीजें हैं. एक तो मतलब ह्यूमिलिटी एंड हॉस्पिटैलिटी बहुत अच्छी, तो
वो
वो
तो
हम सीख
पिछले
सकते
कुछ
हैं. एंड
सालों में हम
ऑल्सो
लोग कंप्लीटली भूल चुके हैं, बट आई होप वी
हाँ,
आर
वो
वी
जो
रिमेंबर इट.
राइट राइट, वो जो मुझे लगता है, वो जो अतिथि देवो भव वाला जो कंसेप्ट है ना, वो थोड़ा सा भूल रहे
हिल
हैं
गया
हम
है.
धीरे धीरे. तो
हाँ.
वो हाँ, तो वो थोड़ा, एंड द वे वी ट्रीट फॉरेनर्स इन आवर कंट्री इज हॉरिबल.
या.
So I think we can learn a lot from Africa, especially in that space. Um, we can learn a lot about accepting. So if you go to Africa, still there are a lot of places which are very diverse. Like you have people from India living with people, somebody from Germany, somebody from Africa, like this, like especially East African countries. There's a lot of these diverse communities living there, which I have not seen as much in India. So
या, यहाँ
that
पे नहीं
is
होता.
very interesting. कि मतलब मेरा पड़ोसी जर्मनी का है, मेरे सामने वाला बंदा रहता है, वो इटली से आया कुछ महीनों के लिए, यहाँ रहेगा, फिर चले जाएगा, तब तक जब तक रहेगा, अब तो हम लोग उसके लिए खाना बनाएंगे. I mean, I was like, okay, cool, so
या.
that sort of acceptance is not there, I feel, and we can learn about that from Africa. And also history. There's a lot of parallels that we have that we don't talk about, like, so lot of trade used to happen between India and Africa, especially during the Silk Route and during the Arab traders who used to trade between Africa, East Africa especially, and in India. There's a lot of knowledge sharing that has happened, and a lot of things that you would find similar if you go to Eastern African countries. I was like, oh wow, this is so cool. So okay, so chapati is very common in East Africa, and I was like, oh, interesting. And everybody knows chapati, and sabko sab pata hai. So these kind of things are very interesting. And I mean, I can keep on going on about Africa. So ऐसा मेरे
No,
को तो
I'm sure
endless
you
है.
can. I'm sure you
So
can. The
yeah,
most
so there's
interesting
like
thing
a
I
lot of
found
things we can.
the most
Hmm.
interesting thing I found about the conflict areas that you said where the borders are straight. When I was a child and we had to draw maps of India, I used to wistfully look at the map of America and parts of Africa कि वहाँ के बच्चों के
Hmm.
लिए कितना आसान होता होगा. स्केल
कितना
लो, लाइन खींचो, मैप बन गया.
एग्जैक्टली ऐसे. यू सर ऊपर थोड़ा सा
हो
रफ
गया.
होगा,
ये
तीन
हमारा
साइड्स
देश है.
स्ट्रेट है. बढ़िया है.
पर उसमें ये भी है
राइट.
ना कि हमारा जो झंडा है उसको बनाते समय लगता था, ओह गॉड, 3 रंग लगाओ, फिर अशोक चक्र बनाओ, फिर गिन-गिन के 24 डंडे, अंटिल आई सॉ द फ्लैग ऑफ बर्मा. वहाँ के
राइट,
बच्चे, मुझे लगता
एग्जैक्टली.
है वहाँ के बच्चे स्कूल छोड़ के चले जाते होंगे झंडा बनाने से पहले.
हाँ हाँ, और श्रीलंका फॉर दैट मैटर, यू हैव लाइक पूरा ऐसा है,
या
पूरा ड्रॉ कर रहा है बैठ के वो शेर उसको बेचारे बच्चे को. सो
या
क्रेजी,
राइट.
क्रेजी.
सो
राइट.
हमारा एक घंटा होने वाला है एंड द लास्ट
हम्म.
क्वेश्चन आई विल टेक इज फ्रॉम, ओके, वी हैव फॉर द लव ऑफ कॉमिक्स हियर and they're saying,
ओह ऑसम.
I really been enjoying African Caravan. I'm looking forward to the next chapter. Great.
Oh,
You have a fan here.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And Samarth says, I so want to visit Egypt and Tanzania once. Egypt because of the pyramids and Sphinx, and Tanzania because of Kilimanjaro. Hopefully someday. I'm sure there are people in Africa who are thinking like, I want to visit India for Taj Mahal. But the joy
Right.
in like the secret, like if there is a thing to be learned from what Shikant has done is that the thing we like, it's that saying like you come for X, stay for Y. So these things are the come for
Hmm.
thing, and you stay for something else, right?
Right, right, right. Like it, people will kill me for it, but we never went to Kilimanjaro or any of those touristy places
Yeah.
or anything. I mean, of course, yeah, we went to pyramids because we were in Egypt and it was nearby. I was like, okay, चलो ये तो देखना ही चाहिए, but not specifically कि मुझे जाना है और uh, ये देखना है. So that is very वो मतलब वो टूरिस्टी वाला एंगल नहीं रखे और इंसानों की
मोज़ाम्बिक के
तरह ट्रैवल करें काफी अच्छा है. हम्म.
मोज़ाम्बिक के फ्लैग के ऊपर सचमुच AK-47 है, मुझे नहीं पता था।
आई डोंट थिंक सो. झूठ. मुझे गूगल करना पड़ेगा.
मैं भी करता
I,
हूँ।
I, I, I'm doubting this knowledge. This info is not correct.
मोज़ाम्बिक फ्लैग। There is a gun. I'm not sure if it is an AK-47, but there is a gun. Oh yeah, there is a gun.
Oh, yeah. Actually,
There
yeah.
is a
Oh,
gun and
right.
a
I never noticed this small icon. I always saw these colors. But yeah. Huh, it's
ये
crazy, right? Yeah.
सबसे
Hmm.
आसान था जापान के बच्चों की लाइफ। व्हाइट पेपर लो, लाल गोल बनाओ, बन गया
Hmm.
झंडा।
Goal bana. Sahi. Short. Simple. Hmm.
So great. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Shikant, for coming live. And thank you, everyone who came to the chat and joined. And for everyone else who's watching this at a later point in time, please visit Churma, www.churma.com, read the comic, and support their work as far as possible. And also subscribe to this channel because there's going to be more interviews and conversations and live streams in the future. This Sunday at 5:30, I'm going to be live with Ashwin Kalmane, who's a comic book writer, and we're going to discuss the Disney ka Hawkeye series review. Live type ka kuch hoga. I'm not sure these are videos. These are random conversations, so I don't know what to call them. But we're going to do this on Sunday at 5:30. Have you seen Hawkeye, Shikant?
Sorry, but I very poor in
Oh, you
superhero
don't.
space.
अच्छा अच्छा नहीं good, that's good because I like.
Disappointment.
So MCU का कुछ भी नहीं देखा?
I saw the Spider-Man that came
No
because
no
one
no
of
no
my
no no
colleague was very
don't
excited.
don't
So
spoil
no
it.
spoilers.
Don't spoil it. Okay.
No spoilers. I was just saying that I just went for my colleague and he was like, "मेरे को बहुत देखने का मन है." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then more like his reaction to what was happening on screen was more interesting than the movie for me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've been like warily scrolling through YouTube. कहीं पे स्पाइडरमैन का कुछ दिखता है तो जल्दी से उसको मतलब एक आ गया ना to hide the video that you don't see or
Right,
don't
right,
recommend
right.
channel. I've been going like really monumentally scary. It's the experience of scrolling through YouTube.
Crazy.
पता
Yeah,
नहीं कहाँ
awesome.
कोई कोई थंबनेल में डाल देते हैं कैरेक्टर की फोटो सो यू फाइंड आउट द ओ गॉड ये होने वाला क्या
Hmm.
पता नहीं है
So,
बट
so, so you're
या
like die-hard follower of Marvel and superhero genre.
who me no not really I
Hmm.
like
Okay.
Marvel makes good movies, they're entertaining and it's
Hmm.
fun to follow it, but there is a kind of
Right.
fatigue that is setting in also,
Hmm.
like
Okay.
like
Okay.
there is a kind of like the reason I went into audio was because there is some kind of a video fatigue also setting in. Like
Hmm.
my patience for making videos, sitting in front of the camera, making a video and uploading it to YouTube is going down, which is part of the reason I'm doing this live. Like if
Right.
this involved having a conversation with you for 1 hour, recording it on Zoom, downloading it, editing it, adding all the stuff, and then uploading it, I wouldn't have done it. But I'm doing it because it's
Hmm.
live, and I do want to talk to interesting people.
Nice. 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 Awesome. But yeah, it was fun chatting with you, and thanks for having me.
Yes,
I think it was
thank you.
you. I was glad that you asked like very relevant questions about the comic, and people also were watching.
हाँ,
Uh,
so
Thanks for
मैंने
listening. Yeah.
I one of my pet peeves is when people invite me for a podcast and they don't know anything about me. So I decided not to be that guy.
Right, right, right. वो तो सही बात है. नहीं नहीं.
they
But
ये
it's
है
always fun to. हाँ.
न्यू पॉडकास्टर्स गेट सम ज्ञान की हाँ लोगों को भेजो मतलब आ जाओ मेरे पॉडकास्ट पे हाँ कोई बोलने वाला नहीं है So if I am
Hmm.
my thing is, oh, this is someone who's starting a new podcast. They think I'm worth it. Turns out they just sent out the same invite to 20 people, and I was the one who
Hmm.
said yes. So yeah, so I don't want to do that. I want to have like conversations that about things that the people who come to the live scene they want to talk about.
No, that's true. And also, I've been listening to your content, like not a lot on YouTube, but mostly on Instagram. That
Hmm.
you have been making a lot of videos and all. And I one thing which I really like about it is that it's very thought provoking. At the same time, it's well thought content. It's not something, because
Thank you.
often in this world, like, there's a lot of people who are just randomly coming online and randomly blabbering about things which they hardly know anything about.
Hmm.
So it feels very refreshing to listen to somebody who, you feel that, okay, इस इंसान ने सोचा इस बारे में, and then have accumulated that, thought in a particular video properly. So that feels really nice. So people who are watching this also, please do subscribe to Vimo's YouTube channel, because I think it's very useful.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Sometimes I
So
feel
I,
like
I
I'm one
really
of
like
those
it.
people
Hmm.
who comes live and just blabbers about things that he knows nothing about, which is why I decided to make these live streams about other people and what they know, because then I can ride on their success and appear smart. But yeah, thank you, thank
Awesome.
you,
Yeah.
and I will see you around. I'll stay in touch over WhatsApp and wait for the next chapter of African Caravan.
Yes. Yes. We'll
Cool,
stay in touch, and I'll keep updating you with all my new adventures.
great. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.